watching the #1 podcast in the whole entire wrestling community. And I'm one of your hosts, Juanzo.
And I'm your other host, Jean Paul Leck.
And together we are Rope Break. And as a special, Saturday gift, we're back with the Broken Skull Sessions, Jean Paul, because we're celebrating what? We're celebrating the 30 years.
There it is.
Mark. Yeah. And we're celebrating the mark of Mark Calloway. So we're celebrating the 30 years of the career of The Undertaker. Second part for the Broken Skull Session, Jean Paul. This is like The Undertaker was the first wrestler that opened up this whole series of shows with the Rattlesnake, Stone Cold Steve Austin. So we're going to be talking about our reaction.
One more round. Isn't that what they called it? Or like one more shot? Yeah, one more round.
One more round because of popular demand. We bring The Undertaker for more stories and all of that. So, Jean Paul, what do you think about all of this? I think it was, at least for me, much more interesting, much more shoot-wise.
This was definitely the best Broken Skull session by far. And I mean, you could have had this one and the other one, the first episode. You could have done this twice as long, 6 hours, 6.5, 7 hours given us, and it still wouldn't have been enough for The Undertaker. This is definitely the best by far. I could easily see them doing a third episode in a couple years from now, but I agree with what you said. This is definitely the closest to like a shoot interview WWE will get. They touched on a lot of personal stuff and a lot of stuff, because the first episode was just like, okay, yeah, The Undertaker, tell us all the legit moments. This went into a little bit more like side stuff that maybe we wouldn't really know. And also it went into, some of the stuff they touched on in the first episode, but into more backstage, more kind of like, yeah. The only thing we still don't know is why he doesn't like cucumbers.
Oh, yeah.
It's the only thing we still don't know.
Yeah. Only Paul Bearer will give us the answer for that, but absolutely. So, family, thank you so very much for giving us all your love and support, being with us through like every single thing that we do. So, thank you so much. Jean Paul, start me up with the menu.
Speaking of things that we do, check out the Friday Night Smackdown review. Kevin Owens looks like he's going to be the new #1 contender. I like this. I like this attitude with Kevin Owens, but is it going to last? Is it going to mean anything? Is he going to have a universal title reign? I'm going to say no, and a big fat no. So, we'll see what they do, but what else do we got?
Yo, Jean Paul, like he says a fat Kevin Owens no. So, let's go, to like a Survivor Series like results and the highlights, the review that I do in absolute Spanish for every single one of you. If you want to check out the English, Jean Paul is right there with me. Great review, and right here we just talk about everything that happened, even with the farewell of The Undertaker, all of that, and this great match that we have with like the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns and Drew McIntyre. Don't forget to check us out on that. So now let's talk about this Undertaker that like is more. We get like another like you said, uncensored Undertaker, and he starts like talking more like for example, like he wants to keep kayfabe, but he knows like open himself up. Revealing the stories, have been able to actually like available for more avenues, for more opportunities. But like I think he somewhat inside he doesn't want to do it, but he knows he has to do it.
Yeah, that was pretty much one of the first things Stone Cold says. He's like, okay, you're pretty much done. Let's say like the career it's 99.9% over, and it's like, are you happy with yourself for coming out and kind of breaking kayfabe, letting people in the world of The Undertaker, or do you wish you didn't? And then he goes, part of me wishes I did. Part of me, like, I'm glad I did because it opens up, like you said, all these avenues. He can do these interviews. He can do, the Last Ride documentary, all that stuff. And not only to share the story with the fans who love to hear it, but let's be honest. What does that do for The Undertaker?
Yeah,
that gives him money, which is fair, and I respect that. Money. That's legit. I mean, I respect that, but and then speaking of all the avenues, Stone Cold's like, "Are you working me? You're always a whiskey guy," and then he pulls out the Undertaker wine, and that's something. If he was the dead man, rest in peace, and that's all he ever said. Besides cutting promos here and there, but that version of the Undertaker wine, people would be like, "What?" Only Mark Calloway can do that. So it's one of the things where look at all these doors and business opportunities that open up for him. So as a fan looking at it, like from my perspective, I don't blame him for doing it, but it's one of the things that starts off right off the bat in your face. Like, he said, I'm 90% Mark Calloway. He's like pretty much he's like the Undertaker, like they said in that 30 years, he's laying the Undertaker, now he can rest in peace.
Yeah. And I think that he needs to, like you said, get a little bit of this, and also like, hey, being on different channels. Jumpo, the other day I saw him in like Univision, Univision for like the Spanish channels. Like he was actually being interviewed there. when in my wildest dreams I will see the Undertaker,
Yeah, that's what I mean.
talking about soccer, talking about like he loves Angel Garza, he loves Andrade. He says I have the utmost respect for like Rey Mysterio, all of that. Like imagine that. When in ever you will thought that the Undertaker will be like sharing, like being in so much media, doing all this stuff. So I feel that like, hey, he caved the kayfabe for 30 some years. Why not just opening up?
And see, this is the thing. It's not like he's one of the first guys that broke it. It's not, kayfabe is dead. It doesn't exist in wrestling. So for him holding on to it, as long as he did, we respect him for it. But it's not like he was saving anything. It's not like him breaking kayfabe like shatters the whole realm of wrestling or anything. So.
Exactly,
We already know he's not a dead man. We already know he can't shoot lightning from his hands. You know what I mean? It's like, come on, like
we already know that like he doesn't like he's not Kane's brother.
Yeah, exactly.
For example, like, do you like the Winged Eagles version with like the Undertaker?
No, I really don't like any of those custom belts, to be honest. I mean, this one, I think I like it a little bit better than Triple H's. I'd have to look at the one that they made for Triple H a couple months ago, but no, I really don't like any of these. And I think they did one for Eddie Guerrero too, or his was the Undisputed championship, but no, I don't really like any of these. I know the Undertaker kind of popped, but I feel it was like a fake pop. He was like, "Oh, Vince, don't get mad."
He was caving. It's the first time that I've seen it. It's like the first time that I've seen it. Oh, it looks pretty legit. You know what? It doesn't even look legit. The price for it. So I'm not going to go my way. To get
and to go on that note, not off topic, but I don't even like the smoking skull belt, like Austin's when he had that smoking skull, or like the Brahma Bull belt. I didn't like any of those.
No, I've never been a fan of those either, because, like you said, I like the legitimacy of like a regular belt. Like for example,
everybody gets the same belt.
Yes, I agree, I agree, Paul. I think the most beautiful one for me is like the World Heavyweight Championship from WCW. That is the one that I love the most. It's just nice. You see the world.
Oh yeah, to me, I like that and the Winged Eagle. Those are like my two, like for the two companies. Yeah,
that's true. And so like let's talk about, like, for example, they went a little bit more in depth of like the Hell in a Cell with Mick Foley. See of that, like hearing his side of the story, kind of more open, and how did this come about? This was pretty cool. I enjoy how like he even says like, hey, remember when Stone Cold says, well, like what happened, like from your perspective when you're seeing it from on top of the cell, looking down when you did the choke slam, and make it, like we didn't know if he was really hurt, if he was paralyzed, if something really bad happened to him, something catastrophic. They use that word, and he goes, well, I was trying to see from my point of view if he actually moved. If there was any movement in him, then at least I will know that he was okay. But if he wouldn't move, then there would have been something really, really bad. And so I like how like he humbles himself, and he really cared for Mick at that point, and also Stone Cold too.
Oh yeah, they were definitely putting like Mick over big, just for not like, oh yeah, he's legit or anything, but just like how much this guy loves the business. And they even said, because earlier they talked about the match obviously with Shawn Michaels, and how Michaels is the best of all time as for like a worker goes, like in the ring, like he can put on the best match or anything. They say like Ric Flair is the best overall, but like as a worker, they're like Shawn Michaels was the best, and that match, and Mick Foley and Undertaker are the second Hell in a Cell.
Yes.
So it's like, how do we follow? Mick's like, how do I follow that? And Mick knew he wasn't an idiot. He's like, I can't out wrestle Shawn Michaels. I can't put on a better wrestling match. So what am I gonna do? He has to do that, and it's definitely the most memorable Hell in a Cell. It's more memorable than the first one, which had Kane's debut and everything. And like Austin said jokingly, yeah, Kane and I had to follow this match.
And it was a terrible match, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, and Mick Foley even came out during that match. But back to this with the Undertakers. Yeah, he even said like standing on top of that cell, he's like, I thought it was over. He's like, I thought the match was done, and then Mick was moving, and then it was like, okay, I guess I'll jump down, and they're like, oh, we're still wrestling. Mick's thumping the tacks, and it's like this crazy son of a bitch, and
going, and then the choke slam, and then the choke slam on the tags, and then the tombstone. And that, I don't, if you remember, you picked up that line. He goes, even when he's being pinned, you see how like he kicked out a little.
Yeah, he was like squirming his legs to try to
that, not Hogan, being like, like bullshit, like, oh yeah, I'm good. No, it's like kind of like, okay. So I love how like he opened up about all these things. Telling us like how he really feel at that moment. Like he says, out of body experience. about all of this with Mick Foley. So it was really cool. About also like the thing with Shawn, Stone Cold says like, do you really like, did this happen with like when I was gonna get the title from Shawn at WrestleMania? Is this legit or is this a storyline? And he's like, no. I was really taped myself up. I was in gorilla position waiting for something would happen.
Yeah, saying like everybody, like Vince and all them are sitting there looking at Taker like, so.
Yeah, what the hell is he doing? So, but it shows you like how a company man, how loyal he was, because he says, it's not about me. It's like you needed to have that belt. That was the right transition. It was Shawn was gonna go for how long we didn't know, but it turned out to be 5 years. And then at least we needed a guy, and at that time you're on fire, so you have to be the guy. You have to ride with us. And also, like they mentioned this, hey, we were at war with somebody else, so we needed this. So I would make sure that like this happened. So pretty cool. I mean, and he goes like, I was actually telegraphing it in my head. How is mine gonna come out and all of that? So if that would have happened, cool. We would have been legit. Even like the Montreal screw job even better than me. So even they touch about that a little bit.
Yeah, they said like, oh, what did you feel about this? How was that? Because Austin was like, I was there, but I was still kind of new. I was getting a little bit hot. I didn't want to like, but he didn't really have too much sway in the locker room or anything yet. And Taker said like, no, he was pissed. He was obviously a good fan of and friend of Brett, so he went to confront Vince, and Vince was actually on his way to talk to him, and he's like, hey, you got to talk to him. And he's like, oh, I am. And if Vince says that to Taker, he's legit. I don't think he's ever lied to him. They have that trust, so they're legit. Yeah. And I know he did with that story because I know Brett punched him out, and I'm pretty sure Brett was naked when he punched him out. So that was legit for Vince to get beat up by naked Bret Hart. But I mean, it's one of those things, like you said, that was all around the same time. Brett leaves. Not that he was a major player in WCW because they completely flopped that, but it's like, there was a war going on. It's like, hey, Austin's got to be the man because, WCW. But that's another thing, too. Taker never left. And I don't think they actually touched on that. Maybe they did in the first episode, but they never were like, oh, how come you never left or you never did anything like that? But that just proves how legit he is and how loyal he is.
Yeah, but see that the one thing they said in this line is like, hey, I knew that like we needed to win, we needed to get over, WCW, and that was Vince's point of view. At that time, I saw it from the boys' point of view. It's like I gotta go after my friend and defend him. And, I didn't really care about the owner, the promoter, like Vince McMahon. But now that I see the big picture, it's like, hey, Vince.
Well, do you want to know what's shitty? Maybe Vince was so paranoid because he let Ric Flair in '92 show up with somebody else's belt and parade that around on TV. Maybe he didn't want Brett to go do the same thing.
And Jean Paul, like before that, it was Alundra throwing the women's championship in the trash. So, Vince was like, probably don't do that because then, my company is going to really go out.
But the thing is, though, and not to get too off topic with Brett, but I feel like Brett like loves wrestling so much. I don't think he would do that. Yeah, that's not somebody like Alundra Blaze or like Ric Flair that's like spiteful in that aspect. I think he's like, no, I respect the business because he even said like they made me a world champion.
Oh yeah,
like 5 times they made me legit. So
yeah. No, I agree. But like those are the kind of stories that you get from the Undertaker. You get a little bit of the Bone Street Crew. This is awesome. This picture, absolutely, I'm in love with. You can see the Godfather. You can see Yoko. You see Rikishi. You see Savio Vega. You see everybody that was pretty much in like the final farewell. We saw them for a minute, right, Jean Paul? Not even a second.
Yeah. And then, I'm going to say that final farewell, you can actually watch the whole entire Survivor Series review in Spanish quicker than you can probably watch the whole Undertaker thing at the end of Survivor Series.
Absolutely, yeah, it is a lot shorter, yes.
But I like this with the Bone Street Crew. There we go. Now I can finally. Yeah. But when they talked about how he met Godfather, and Godfather is like every time they're drinking or whatever, Taker's real drunk. He's like, "Hey, I want you to take my Rolex." He's like, "I want you to have my watch." And Godfather's like, "Oh, okay." And then the next day, he's like, here's your watch back, man." And then Austin's like, "How many times do you think you gave him your watch in your whole like career?" And he's like, "To be fair, like not like overestimate it, probably like 20 times."
Yes, you see the side like how they became friends and how they stay brothers. So if Paul gives me his watch, I will give it back. I will give it back. It's fine. And
then one thing I always love when people talk about Yokozuna, and they're actually going to do a new like documentary series. One of them is going to be on Yokozuna, so I'm really looking forward to that because he's one of those guys who, I mean, it was unfortunate, obviously, with his weight, how he exploded at the end, but even for how big he was, like 93 and stuff. I mean, legit.
Oh yeah.
He's moving and stuff and legit, and everybody puts him over as like, oh, he was a hell of a guy. He was so great. He was so funny. He's so fun to be around. But then when it was like, oh yeah, here's a Phineas and like all the other like Midi and all that, was just like, they don't even talk about it.
A ministry, whatever. Yeah.
Or like Crush.
I also couple they became friends with the Godfather. Like how like they were having a match and they never seen each other before, and then Godfather like started like really shooting and kind of being green.
He said like Godfather was so green, he thought wrestling was still a fight. He didn't know it was like you work together.
And I love how he goes, "Okay, kid," he's like,
because he cracked
the hard way, or we can do this the easy way.
Yeah, I think he said that they were on the outside, and he's like, I ran, and he was chasing me, and I took a chair and fucking blasted him as hard as I could. He's like, "All right, son, we're gonna do it the easy way, or the legit way."
The easy way. Like, all right, man. So good, all of that. They touch a little bit about Ric Flair. We talk about Ric Flair and the Undertaker, the match, so we don't need to go in depth on that. But like again, the same thing. Flair loses his confidence, doesn't know he can go anymore. But like the one thing it was requested is Vince had Rob Van Dam in mind instead of for WrestleMania 18. Like he actually forgot that to put somebody against the Undertaker. So and the fact that he chose Flair, getting his confidence back, that's why we got another 6 years of Ric Flair around that. Like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that funny how like he had that moment. Like he's like Ric Flair was one of my idols and. Then he got to like restore the confidence in his idol and stuff, how cool that was. And then not saying like, the Undertaker was Roman Reigns' idol, because I don't think it was, but then it's like later in his career, his confidence is shaken after this match, and it's like, can I really do it? And I don't think we're going to get 6 more years of the Undertaker after that, but, it's just weird and like how we see his whole career like come like full circle almost.
Yes, and a lot of times, that's really cool to see that it happens for a lot of people, and the fact that like you can actually do that, go full circle. And like you said, the match that we're talking about is this 21-1. The Brock Lesnar thing, Undertaker loses his confidence. We talk about this, in the first Broken Skull session, because we actually covered that, a whole year, before. Like last year we did that, so it's cool to see that. But like the one part I don't like, and is like, and I want your thoughts on this. Is like how he goes, oh, Roman would have benefited more from the streak. There's no way. If they would have gave it to Roman, I will not be doing rope break. That's how
okay. I think he meant in the sense of Brock, who would have benefited from beating The Undertaker more? Brock Lesnar or Roman Reigns? If you're going just based off those two, which I think is what they were doing, then obviously, Roman Reigns. But, I mean, no, if you're talking everybody employed in your company, oh, no, there's a hell of a lot more people that are more deserving. And the answer, is none of them. If I'm looking at none of them.
Yeah.
But, I mean, if you had to pick somebody, there's somebody who's more deserving. Roman was already, a 4-time champion, world champion at that point?
Yeah, and he was already a Royal Rumble winner. He had a lot of at that time, and he was already hated, so he didn't need anything to. If anything, let's talk about just between the Shield, Dean Ambrose, that or Jon Moxley.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody, I don't think anybody from the Shield needed to, because they were pushed to the main event legit. But like a returning Drew McIntyre or something.
There you go. Somebody that is like not for that.
Yeah, he's never a world champion yet. Okay, IC champ. Okay, whatever. Exactly. No offense to IC champ, but like, okay, whatever. But like to return, to have all this stuff, that would have been legit.
Yes, and they will talk about a little bit of this. So this I was really popping for, because when this happened, I actually watched it and I believe it was a legit shoot. This is when like Brock Lesnar just loses to Cain Velasquez.
And what do you think? I'm sorry. Finish your thing, and then I want to ask you something.
Oh no, yeah. And it was really cool because that stare down, that completely set up for the match. It happened 4 years later, but at least every year I was under the impression it's going to be Brock Lesnar. It's going to be Brock Lesnar because of this, particular moment when like Brock and him stare down, and he goes, "You want to do it? You want to do it?" And then he keeps walking, but you always have that thought that like every single year of Mania, this was going to happen. I mean, if that would have happened in this year or the 2011, it would have been amazing. But go ahead.
Oh yeah, and that's the thing too, because Stone Cold even says, "Well, look how many years later it was till this match actually happened." And he's like, "Was this a work or this a shoot?" Yeah. And if you wanted, like, Undertaker just kind of like smiles and he doesn't answer right away, and he's like, "It's a work, brother." Yeah, he's like, I was working, brother. Yeah. And then it's funny because I'm like, you don't really know. The way he answered that and smiled, I'm like, he probably knew, okay, Brock got beaten the first round, whether he got beaten the first round or whether he won or whatever. Brock knows who The Undertaker is, right? Like, clearly knows who he is. So he's not. It don't matter what Undertaker says to him. Brock's not going to punch him out. And like he said, Brock had to walk that way. Like he chose to. He didn't have to, because that was the long way to walk past the Undertaker. He could have taken the short way back to the locker room. He's like, no, he chose to walk past me. He kind of stopped, and it's like I took my moment. So I don't think he told Brock beforehand, hey, I'm going to say something to you if you walk by me, and then we can use it in 5 years from now for an angle. No. I think Brock was like, oh yeah, I know Taker's here. Let me walk by him and kind of give him the respect. And when he did, Taker was like, well, let me just use this opportunity. I don't think anything was planned. I think that was all. I think it was all this shoot.
Let's create some buzz about it. Let's try to like work something out. I mean, it happened 4 years later, but cool despite that. I mean, the match, we already talked about this so many times. No reason to really go in depth on that. But like, let's touch upon also on this, Paul. Paul Bearer, his influence in the career of The Undertaker. That was, of course, really great. We watched the Mortician. We were shooting about it,
Yeah, and they actually talked about his, like, one of his first matches was Texas Red when he came down, and they sent Percy Pringle down, like, 5 minutes later, and he's like, what the hell are you doing here? And he's like, I think Percy was there to lead me back to the locker room, because this was a match against Bruiser Brody. He's like, after Bruiser Brody beat the shit out of me, he's like, I needed Paul Bearer to walk me back to the locker room.
And then he goes, I'm your manager.
Yeah, so, and then it was born from there. And, I mean, it was great because, like he said, when they brought in Paul Bearer, and this was talked in the Mortician, too, I believe, when they brought in Paul Bearer, and they're like, so what do you do? Like, what kind of things? Like, I'm a mortician and all this stuff.
What kind of special talents?
Yeah, it's like,
that Vince McMahon has every single time.
Yeah,
like, before signing somebody.
And when he told them he was a mortician, they all started laughing, and Paul Bearer was like, oh my God, like he was so scared, but it's because they were looking for a manager for The Undertaker. So it's like a match made in heaven, or in this, case, a match made in hell. But yes. I mean, this is really good. And like here you have a legit picture, his first tattoo, go back, watch Survivor Series 91 to see The Undertaker beat Hogan like I did. And you'll see him. They even mentioned this first tattoo that he's getting right here. So I'm really good.
Percy right there, or Paul Bearer,
Yep.
What would have been The Undertaker without Paul Bearer? It would have been a complete different, situation.
See, that's the thing. Nobody, I mean, and it wasn't very long, so that's another reason why, but nobody goes, oh yeah, Undertaker and Brother Love, that's legit. I would say about a good 70, and this number might not be, it could be more, but I would say probably 70% of, wrestling fans don't even know that Brother Love managed The Undertaker.
Yeah, you gotta be a diehard fan to understand that, yeah.
Yeah, like, you probably like, oh yeah, this guy in a white suit, he's walking him out at Survivor Series, but after that, it's probably Paul Bearer, and it's like, well, not right away, but yeah, close enough.
It took like maybe like a month or two, I think, for like The Undertaker to come out with Paul Bearer. But I mean, like you said, match made in hell. I love it, and because of that, we had this whole legit story, with like the brothers, right there, with Kane. This is probably like even Kane said it, Jean Paul said it, Undertaker said it. All these guys book legit stories. I gotta agree with all of them, and it's like one of the best stories that the WWE ever come up with.
And what do you think about? And again, because they do so many specials with The Undertaker this month, I'm not sure which one it was said in, but I know Undertaker said that. Well, like they pretty much agreed that he's like the best character. He tries to stay humble, but like The Undertaker is the most legit character in WWE, like of all time. But Taker said that Kane is the second best.
Oh yeah.
And I'm almost inclined to agree with that, just because of like the longevity of the character and how he changed, like from the picture here, and then you want to jump ahead, like the corporate Kane, everything Kane with Daniel Bryan, and even everything in between that, like where he unmasked and everything. But no, to me, the still the best Kane, and again, it's nostalgia reasons, but the most legit Kane is the one we see right here. This storyline.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with you. Kane is just like the whole story, like about Cain and Abel. Remember, like Cain and Abel. That you go with biblical, like things, elements. Of course, it's gonna come out really great. And remember, like, oh, he's coming, Undertaker. Kane's alive, and all of those things. And then the fact that like the Undertaker becomes like a murderer because, like you said, the house on fire where your parents died, but Kane didn't. All of that story gave the Undertaker such more layers. That before he.
But and isn't that funny when you think back at that? Like if that's the legit thing, and they didn't, it's not like, oh yeah, it was Kane who did it, whatever. It's just like when Paul Bearer says that, it's like, well, then isn't Taker the heel?
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's like we cheer for Kane, but I mean that was never gonna happen. But
exactly, that's the point. That's the money right there, because the Undertaker and Kane. went back like heel face throughout the whole story.
Mm-hmm. You know? And the awesome thing with Undertaker is I believe this is really the first time we saw in his career, which at this point has only been like 7 years or so, is just like the fear in his face.
Yes.
Like when Kane came in and ripped off the door and was just standing in front of him, he was like like shocked. He was just like what is this? Like he couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I'm watching a dead man, like literally like watching a dead man, and just like how good like.
And I don't know, I might be in the minority here, but I love the way that Kane hits the tombstone. That when he hits it like so fast.
Oh yeah,
you know what I mean. It just looks cool. It's not like the Undertaker. It's like real slow and impactful. Kane just does it like boom.
Yes, yeah, and it is a lot quicker. Yes, I have to agree with you on that. A little bit more. This is a cool picture, also like Stone Cold and the Undertaker.
Yeah.
Talking about this great stuff. I love like the shots of like whiskey that they did, all like keep going back and forth. Really cool stuff. Like this rivalry with Kane, we've already talked about all of this, but like it's always cool to hear from the man. He's like, hey, this came out good, and like the best thing, at least for me, is when he says, I never had a guy like this my size that was really good to work with me. Because if you think about it, the other guy around that time is Giant Gonzalez, but we all know how that went. We all know, like,
oh yeah, I mean, and there were some guys that it was just like, okay, you had Big Boss Man and some of these other guys that were in there. Even the the Godfather was big, but I mean, just Kane is just Kane would he would do the clothesline, or not the like a clothesline or like a forearm off the top rope and stuff. Like, Kane was doing moves that a guy his size people weren't used to seeing do. So. Yeah. I mean, I agree. Kane was legit, and I think the only thing that bothers me is that like 1 day title reign.
Oh, yeah. After that, he's called the aura done. After that, like that. I mean, the Brothers of Destruction is always badass, but always he lived under the shadow of the Undertaker, all the way to like 2010 when he actually becomes world champion, and then he starts beating the Undertaker a little more. He gets the win. He wins a Hell in a Cell. He wins like the Buried Alive match and all of that. But after that, it was just like, just always Undertaker will get the win over him. But I mean, rightfully so, because it was the Undertaker. But they were able to prolong the story for years and years. Remember, we hate each other, then we're going to do Brothers of Destruction, and then we hate each other again. I'm here for my brother, all the way up to like the days that like we saw DX against the Brothers of Destruction, and that turned out to be a god-awful match that nobody wants to remember.
Yeah, and I actually thought they were going to touch on that a little bit more, and this stuff with Goldberg, they didn't really touch on that, I don't think, at all in this.
Yes, nothing. No.
Yeah, so I mean, and that's okay. Like, again, this is WWE. They're the ones who are directing this, even though they had a shoot type feel. They're still, no, go here, don't go there, go here. Like, okay, legit. I mean. Yeah, so they did talk about, like, the thing with Lesnar and how that sucked, and the match with Roman and how he felt bad and everything. But I was kind of hoping they'd be like, oh, like, were you a little pissed at Goldberg? Like, did Michelle want to kill him? Like, what's going on here? But
that is something that, I didn't even think about, because it's like those bad memories, those negative times from The Undertaker, I tried to put behind my thoughts.
Because this with The Undertaker, it's like, the last, I would say, like, really bullshit moment when we're watching like his career. Sometimes like we have the rose tinted glasses on and we're like, okay, it's Taker, so like we'll excuse it, it's fine. But the match with Roman just like really stood out. And then it's like, okay, then you have the Extreme Rules match, and it's like, okay, legit. Then you do the Brothers of Destruction, and then like he kept having like a bad match, good match, bad match, good match, bad match. You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's the thing. It's just like you said, you try to put all that stuff out of your mind, and then it's like, but when there was so many bad ones in a row right at the end, it kind of stood out.
Then you start actually question, how bad it was. So let's touch upon Wrestle Score Jump. This was good. I liked it. How like he told the story about like of Teddy Long, and how they go.
Oh yeah, selling the Viagra, and then who was it? Was it Mae Young? She's like, you don't need that Niagara. They're like, no, Mae, it's Viagra. And she's like,
no, it's Niagara. Yeah. And
she's like, all you young guys don't need that. It's like,
you don't need that. You don't need that to perform. And I guess like at least Stone Cold was like, but why was that wrong? Like, because you wanna make profit out of your brother.
Yeah. Because they're like, he was getting them for free.
Yeah, he was getting it for free, and like he wanted to make profit out of that. So like he addresses the situation, like, was it really bad? And Edge, I think he said this in one of the interviews. Edge is like, no, most of the time it was always like to poke fun. Even he goes, JVL was actually the prosecutor, like it wasn't. He's supposed to be the defense. I don't know. He all became the prosecution because just like he wasn't like he was all more fun and all of this. But it was a way to show the guys that like, hey, you have to behave in a certain way, being in order like to like be okay with everybody. Don't get it like what we always call backstage heat.
Oh yeah. And Taker was the perfect guy to be, the judge because I mean, hey, he's the dead man, and it's like, like he pretty much, rest in peace. He's gonna put these people in the grave if they need to be, and also, no jokes aside, he had the most respect there. He's one of the most tenured guys there. He had the respect, like we touched on earlier. He never left, never was like, oh yeah, Bischoff, let me sign the dotted line. Oh, okay, just kidding. No, he was always legit. And even another thing too, they didn't touch on is those really bad years where they kept bringing in giant bullshit guys for him to put over.
Oh yeah.
Or for him to at least make look good, but then he'll win in the end. But like you said earlier, Giant Gonzalez, bullshit match, and it's like that's the stuff he had to deal with when he easily could have went to WCW. But I don't think another reason why, which they did say this, I don't think he ever went because when he was there, they said nobody will pay money to see you wrestle.
Yes, yeah.
Well, in WCW, so he was like, nope.
And remember, he always says, "I'll remain loyal."
Remain loyal to Vince.
I remain loyal to Vince McMahon because he gave me an opportunity, something that WCW never did. So that's why, at least, you see, like
and that's again, and all that stuff is why I think people respect him, and that's why he was like, "Hey, I'm going to be the judge on the wrestlers' court." Like everybody says, like even and not with this, but like when I listen to other videos or interviews and stuff, people always say like, when you're new there or you're whatever, people say you gotta go say something to Taker.
Yeah.
Like, you get signed, you gotta go up to him, be like, introduce yourself, be like, hey, it's legit.
What's up, bro? Yeah. He's like, hey,
what's up?
What's up, bro? No, he's like, Mr. Undertaker. Hey, my name is Juan, and here's my friend John Paul. We're Goldberg. Hey, we're good, right? It's all of that. I mean, it's good, like you said. It's just like longevity, and it's the Undertaker. How can you not be afraid of this guy? So no, because let's talk about something that happened here. Like the 2010 Elimination Chamber, Undertaker gets burned. Like he tells one of the pyro guys, hey, can you just reduce the amount of flames that are coming out in my entrance because I just like I can feel the heat and
he's like you have the wrong brother. That's Kane that's supposed to be burned alive, not me.
Yes, exactly. And like he goes into this story because he really gets burned. The 2 or 3 burns. In his entrance, because you can see like the flame went on like onto the.
Well, yeah, he shows the sleeve of the jacket, and it shrunk up how much because of the flame. It like melted the leather on it, and all over his chest. He said was bubbling and all this stuff, and the worst part of it wasn't like, which he said it was bad for him, but it was good for everyone else. Is he was the last guy to come out of his pod. He's like, because if I was the first one. He's like, that poor guy who I was in there with would have got the shit beat out of him. He's like, because I was just so angry. But he was the last guy in the pod. He said there was how many people underneath were feeding him bottles,
water.
the cell. And then he was just dumping the bottles of water on himself to stay cool because he's like, what am I supposed to do? I can't like freak out. I can't run to the back. I got to stay in character.
Yeah.
And I threw off the coat, and that looked. People were like, "What the hell?" But
he was going to come out with the other type of coat. He wasn't going to come out with like the
he was going to be the sleeveless one, so he would have really burned his arm.
Yeah, and then what kind of professional that he goes, and then he goes to the whole match. Remember, he actually goes with and has the match even with Jericho. Shawn Michaels comes out, super kick, and then Jericho becomes world champion. So really great stuff. You see like the kind of guy that the Undertaker was.
Well, that's the thing. Like constant professional.
Yes, and does the work. Constant professional. And just to end, then let's talk about one of your favorite guys. A guy that you absolutely whack to, and rightfully so because outside of Shawn, this guy always gives you like.
Wait. Are you talking who we saw on Tuesday?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the guy that like when like the meme when you leave AJ Styles too long in the dryer, that's what happens, and then there you go. AJ Styles Boneyard match. This of course we love, and I think that like it's really humbling and it's really cool to hear that the Undertaker think that high of AJ Styles, and how like they both, even Stone Cold, like they both agree that like right now he's the best wrestler in the world, or at least if not the best WWE performer. that the company has right now. So
Yeah.
I think it's volumes too, like, both of them to say that about AJ.
Yeah, I really like this, and this was, like you said, this is how we're gonna wrap it up. This is how they wrap it up, and this was good. They said, like, okay, we did the first Broken Skull sessions when we kind of didn't know what your career was going on. You had mentioned how you thought AJ's like the best and everything, and AJ listened to this because AJ called Michelle, was like, hey, like, what's going on? I heard you say you wanted a match. Is this legit? And at this point, this kind of goes back to when Taker's like, yeah, my confidence was kind of done. Because it's like, okay, yeah, legit Extreme Rules, with Drew and Shane and Roman, okay, legit. But then he had the, bullshit matches in Saudi Arabia, and it's like, man, AJ's so good, and he wants to have a match with me, and I'm bullshit. Like, I gotta get good. So he had the surgeries, he trained and everything, and then COVID-19 happened, and then they were gonna have a regular match. And that got changed into now, okay, how are we going to do this? So then they changed the whole storyline where instead of him going after The Undertaker, he would go after, Michelle McCool. He would go after Mark Calloway. So then they're like, well, now we can change this. And he pretty much said, like, because of COVID and everything, they changed the whole entire storyline. Originally, this was just supposed to be a regular wrestling match. Then it got changed to the cinematic match. So it's really cool to be like, we got this great match, but we could have gotten, a really good, just traditional wrestling match as well. And I believe, Rope Break reported it, and, everybody else did too. It was big news at the time. It's like, Undertaker's brother had passed away too during all this. So he talks about that kind of struggles, but like, again, what we said about a professional. He knew he had some family that could be with his mother, but, he should have been there. But he's like, I also needed to be here. And obviously he chose the match, but, it's just great stuff. And then everything he said with AJ, it's like 4 hours. How do you do this whole match in 4 hours? Like at his age, he's like, I got to be taking the bumps and feel the adrenaline, go out there, wrestle the match, and be done. I can't have a little bit of adrenaline and then stop.
So I can
get a bit more. Yeah, and he went into the whole thing, and I was waiting for them to be like, "Oh yeah, the Good Brothers, they're legit," but no mention of them. So
well, yeah, and no impact,
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, no, but this, I love that they put over AJ. He gets, I feel like he doesn't get as much respect, these past couple years as he should. But this was good, and if that is how the Undertaker ends his career, with that being his final match, so to say. I can't complain because look at all the, matches he's given us. If someone's like, oh, that's a bullshit way to end it. Well, then just go back and watch one of his, hundreds of other great matches.
10,000 matches of the Undertaker. Yes. Like you said, if he's retired, we kind of like touch upon this and into the Survivor Series review. If he's done, hey, you know what? There's plenty of matches that he can do. But like there was always that idea in you and me that like when there's crowds, there probably the phone's going to ring. And then, hey, it's Vince one more time. So they will, never say never with The Undertaker. So Jean-Paul, the only thing we got to say to The Undertaker is thank you for, all the career, for all the memories, for make our childhood feel more legit. So, but other than that, this is like this Broken Skull session, our reaction. Thank you so very much, family, for watching.
One more round.
Yeah, one more round. We're going to go all the rounds, with all of you, family. But like always, Jean-Paul mentions, before we close off, then if you guys love what we said and everything, go watch it because it's a really cool episode. It's 2 hours long. We gave it to you in like a half hour. So, if you guys want to go and through the whole shebang, there you go. Spend 2 hours like watching like a really cool interview with Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Undertaker. So, Jean-Paul, remind everybody where they can find us.
Well, you can find us on Rope Break on Facebook, the OG Rope Break on Twitter, Original Rope Break on Instagram, and of course right here on YouTube for the home of the #1 podcast, the Original Rope Break.
So family, thank you so very much. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. Nice weather coming out, at least in Pennsylvania. You and me, Jean-Paul, have one more thing that is left to say, and that is...